to life underground. On the 46th night of the war, Nazi bombers came again to Moscow. The night fighters met them. Below, the women passed around pictures of their husbands and sons, remembering and hoping. That night, one of the sons rammed a German bomber in the sky above Moscow. He was the first Soviet night fighter pilot to do it. His name, Second Lieutenant Viktor Talalikin. He lived to tell his story.
A machine gun burst hit me in the arm. I decided to sacrifice myself, but to down the German first. So I gunned my engine and crashed my plane at full speed into his tail.
Прихожу я в убежище, и, значит, села в фойе.
I was in the air raid shelter listening to the radio. I heard Comrade Talalikin rammed an enemy plane. I was frightened. I said it was my son Vic. I was afraid he'd been killed.
И говорю, ведь это мой сын, Витя. Неужели он убит? Я так испугалась и заплакала. Начали меня тут, конечно, успокаивать. Приносит валерьянки, все ухаживает за мной, успокаивает женщины.
Everybody tried to comfort me, and then after a while, Victor came home. He said, "You see, I came back alive."
И пришел и говорит, вот, и я сам явился на лицо, сынок мой, милый.
Two and a half months later, Lieutenant Viktor Talalikin was surprised by 9 Messerschmitts. The odds were too great.
The Unknown War will be back after this. War in the Air.
Those who died were mourned like brothers.
Друзья, не стало среди нас товарища.
Friends, we've lost a comrade, a friend in battle. He brought his plane back. He came home to us to die.
Весь израненный, он привел ее на свой аэродром. С нами он жил, ребята, и к нам умирать прилетел.
Sons, husbands, boyfriends went to the front. Slowly, the Red Air Force built up its strength. There were plenty of young, eager pilots, but the planes they needed were in short supply. The night of August 8, 1941, an advanced air base on Saaremaa Island in the Baltic Sea. For a handful of Soviet bombers, a very dangerous mission. A raid on Berlin. The object was to show the Germans that their cities were not invulnerable, and the Russians that they had the power to strike back. Was heavy, even at the front line. Four days earlier, Goebbels had declared that no Russian plane would ever fly over Berlin. Goebbels attributed the raid to 150 British bombers, but the rubble was Russian work. It had been a forlorn hope, and it had been a success. It was the first time Berlin heard the roar of Soviet aircraft. It would not be the last. There is a saying that when the guns speak, the muses are silent. But in Russia, even pianists served at the front. Air Force required an oath of its pilots.
Motherland, we solemnly swear to you to spare neither effort nor blood nor our very lives in the fight against the enemy.
By October 5th, 1941, the official figures of Soviet losses totaled 5,136 planes. The total for the end of that first year was estimated by foreign observers at 8,000. That left about 2,000 planes operational, many of them inferior in performance. Forced on the defensive, the Soviet pilots kept up the battle until reinforcements could join them. Some flew as many as 8 missions a day. Far to the rear, the Red Air Force was training new pilots and ground crews. 40,000 in the first 18 months of the war. And behind them, the factories were turning out the planes they would fly, new models in greater and greater numbers. In 6 months, Soviet production of 3 superior fighters quintupled. Far from being annihilated, the Red Air Force was steadily growing into a giant.
The unknown war will continue in a moment. War in the air.
Many women volunteered for the Air Force, in spite of the difficulties of qualifying.
Thank you.